And now, at the end of another full week of news, we are so fortunate to have the analysis of Brooks and Capehart. That is New York Times columnist David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart, columnist for the Washington Post. It is very good to see both of you on this, as it is on every Friday. A lot happened this week in Washington, Jonathan, but I do want to start with this: do we have one or do we not have an infrastructure deal? Yesterday, the president kind of made the unprecedented move of coming out on the driveway with a group of Democrats and Republicans, announced that there was an agreement. But then a couple of hours later, he said there's only an agreement if Democrats, if I get from Congress this spending plan.
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of consternation clearly right now within the Republican Party, and particularly among those senators, about what happened. But the deal, such as it is last I saw, is still holding. It's still there. I think you've had senators like Senator Blunt, Senator Portman, even Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who in the past said, we want a hard infrastructure deal, but we see that the president will probably go reconciliation for these other things, and that's fine. The rub is the president and the Speaker of the House both saying, okay, we'll go for this deal, but you got to do reconciliation also. That's why the Republicans are angry. But everybody needs a deal. The president wants one. The Republicans want one because they need something to go back to their constituents and say, look, this is what we've delivered for you.
And David, the White House, the president, they're saying, well, the president made it clear all along that he was going to want this. But it seems to be a little fuzzy.
Sort of. I think everyone knew there were going to be two bills. There was going to be, well, we didn't know, but the White House, to their credit, worked really hard to get this bipartisan compromise. All the calls, all the meetings, it looked like real legislation, the kind of stuff Joe Biden was born for. And so we get this deal against all the odds. It was unexpected. The Republicans knew there was going to be a reconciliation deal. What they didn't know, I think, is that he was going to threaten to veto the compromise if he didn't get the second. And so it was that linkage that I think took a lot of Republicans by surprise. And not only the ones who really believe in the deal, the Rob Portmans of the world and people like that. So I do think, from what we know, they are right to feel a little aggrieved. Will they walk out on it? Well, Senator Coons from Delaware told Politico this afternoon that so far they've had conversations about bipartisan and they haven't walked out on the deal. Now, a couple people, Lindsey Graham and others, one other, have shown some willingness to walk out on the deal. And if they do that, then you don't have 10 Republicans in the Senate and you can't pass the deal. But like Jonathan says, so far they're hanging in there. And there's a whole bunch of strategy, I can imagine, about how they're going to try to sink the reconciliation later. It's a strategist's dream, this complicated procedure. But so far, I think they've damaged the deal, but they haven't killed the deal.
But your sense is that it's going to hold, you think?
Yes, I think it will hold. And really, does anyone think that Republicans are going to vote in favor of the reconciliation deal? I think the reconciliation deal, it's a given that the 50 Republicans aren't going to vote for it. What it really is about is trying to hold Senators Manchin and Sinema and maybe some unnamed others, Democrats, to ensure that they vote for reconciliation so that everybody's happy.
Yeah. And the Republicans are trying to get Manchin, Sinema to break the linkage. And say, we won't sign on unless you do this alone. To me, the fun will be when the Democrats start fighting amongst themselves. I mean, say this compromise passes, then we've got the reconciliation. The progressives want this big $6 trillion thing. Manchin probably wants less than $2 trillion. And so they all agree on the taxes. They do not agree on where the spending should go. And that's how the bigger thing could fall apart.
Well, speaking of Senator Manchin, he played a critical role in another issue that we saw this week. It seems like it was a long time ago, but it was only Monday, Jonathan, when voting rights came up in the Senate, and the Republicans blocked what the Democrats were trying to do. This is after Senator Manchin, same Joe Manchin, who's involved in infrastructure, said he was on board with a kind of a compromise. I guess my question now is, here today you have the Department of Justice announcing it's going to sue the state of Georgia over its new voting laws. Where are we on voting rights in this country?
Well, I think right now where we are on voting rights is there's not going to be any quick legislative fix. Everyone was focused on the For the People Act as the immediate thing that could be done to stop or blunt what was happening in the states like Georgia. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act hasn't even been introduced, so that's way down the road. I think right now the focus is going to be on what can the Justice Department do? What can the administration do to blunt the impact of Georgia and these other states? And so that's what we saw today: the Justice Department suing Georgia to stop its law. I think that's where the action is. Until the filibuster is done away with, and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer comes along and says, "Okay, here's the For the People Act again, where it can pass by a simple majority." That bill's not going to go anywhere. So it's imperative, really, for the Justice Department to weigh in.
How do you see it?
I guess I see it that way, though. It's not clear to me why people in Congress can't just scale back. I mean, some of the voting rights that were the H.R. 1 and all that seemed to me way overly broad. And Manchin had a proposal. Tim Scott, Republican South Carolina, had a proposal. Maybe something could be scaled back, but nobody seems to be talking about it that way. So we do seem to be going to the courts. I guess there's going to be a Supreme Court ruling on the Arizona voting sometime maybe next week.
Soon, yeah.
And to me, I'm fine with that. I mean, we heard such different things about the Georgia. Joe Biden called it the new Jim Crow. Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State there, who seems like a legit guy, totally disagreed. And so if the courts decide does this discriminate against African Americans, I'm happy to make that decision. I hate having the federal government involved in state voting procedures. But if one party is trying to disenfranchise a race of people, I think American history has established this is when the federal government gets involved. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy to let the courts make a determination, was their intent to discriminate here?
And Jonathan, Democrats are arguing that Republicans are trying to deny people on a massive scale from voting.
On a massive scale, which is why Attorney General Merrick Garland and the Justice Department is taking the action that it took today.
And I guess my question, though, is, whatever the Supreme Court rules, it looks like this is something that's frozen in the Congress. I mean, it's not going anywhere.
No, it's completely frozen until the filibuster. Something is done about the filibuster.
Our favorite Senate maneuver, the filibuster.
Right, until it's reformed or eliminated or what have you. That bill, the For the People Act, is not going to go anywhere.
So, David, we talked about what a busy week. This was also the week that President Biden rolled out his plan for addressing, in a number of different ways, gun crime, violent crime. The homicide rate is way up last year over the year before, and this year way up again. Does this look like, it's a multi-pronged approach, a lot of different initiatives they're laying out there, but does it look like something that could make a difference?
Well, it's tough for a president to control crime. It is mostly an issue, but it is going to be a big voting issue, no question. We've already seen that in the New York Democratic primary, where the crime was the issue. Voters, especially in places like Minneapolis, Portland, they're saying this is common crisis level. People have different explanations for why it is, partly COVID, economic stress, police pullback. And so I do think all these things make it imperative to act. I would give the Biden administration maybe a B-. I support gun control. I'm not sure it's a crime or a homicide reduction measure very effectively. I'm for some police reform. I'm glad they're using COVID money to allow police forces to increase the number of officers. There's clear evidence that if you increase the number of police, you get less crime. But that has to be accompanied by police reform. And so you've got to do a bunch of things all at once to have a just way to reduce crime that's not a penalty on the local communities. And that takes involvement on multiple fronts. And I thought this was a vague gesture more than that kind of intense involvement.
A vague gesture?
I don't know about vague gesture. You are right. Presidents have no impact whatsoever on state and local, crime issues. But people look to the president to do something. And I agree with David. The $350 billion from the America Cares Act to localities to do something related to crime is a very good thing. But we have to remember that, yes, crime has ticked up this year over last year and last year over the year before. But we are way, way down from the bad years of the 90s. Let me just give you quickly. New York City murders in 1990, 2,262. In 2020, 468. A 79% reduction. Robberies in 1990, 100,280. 2020, robberies in New York City, 13,108. It's an 86.9 50% reduction. So crime, yes, crime is ticking up over the last couple of years, but we are nowhere near where we were 30 years ago when it was really bad.
And I should have clarified, homicides are way up. I think violent crime
Right,
is
violent
up a
crime,
little.
right.
And other crime, it's more of a mixed picture. But David, people keep asking, as you say, even though the president can't reach in and control what goes on in handling the crime in individual cities, what example is he setting? What is he saying to lead us?
Well, I think he's made some progress. Yeah, I think we both lived through New York in that period, and crime was terrible there. It was terrible. It was something we all lived with and all endured. I think one of the things he's done, at least take us away from last summer's belief that there was such thing as a free lunch. You could defund the police or reduce the police and not have some after effect. When a party tells you there's no free lunch, whether it's on tax policy, fiscal policy, criminal policy, they're almost always wrong. And so if you just let the police pull back and not get involved, you're going to get more crime. So we got to do two things at once.
We are going to leave it there. Come back and see you guys next Friday.
All right.
David Brooks, Jonathan Capehart, thank you both.
Thanks, Judy.
Have a good weekend.